You are listening to the People-Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, people-centric leaders. Welcome to the People-Centric Podcast. We've got a really cool episode for you today, and Diana's going to kick us off to talk about the topic because this was her idea. We want to give her full credit for the idea because if we don't give her full credit, she gets kind of weird. She gets a little bit. Diana, how do you get? You get what?
Territorial.
Territorial. She gets scary. She gets territorial, and she's lives a long ways from us, but that's when she'll show up at your door when you don't give her full credit for stuff. So Diana came up with this topic, which we're really excited about. So Diana's going to join us. We also have Stephanie Anderson is joining us as well. So we're excited about Stephanie. We're going to hear what she has to say. Stephanie, what do you have to say?
Hello.
That was pretty good. That was good. Good insight for the team. That's great. And then you've got Don here today, Don Harkey. I don't know why I said it like that. You got Don. The Don is on the team today. Don's on the team.
It's gotten out of control already. So welcome to the podcast. It's going to be a fun, zany day.
The Zany Day podcast. You know, the funny part about this, just individual, because we're going to talk about individualization today. So we're going to talk about like, why is the personalization really a thing? Why is that important? And the funniest part about this was Diana said, you know, sometimes I fumble the opening. So she said, Don, do you mind starting the openings? Because you do it so gracefully and so effectively. And so my graceful, effective opening involved me making an air horn sound with my mouth.
I immediately regret my decision.
Very, very smart. Very smart. So Diana, this is a great topic, and we're excited about this topic of individualization. And set us up for that. Why are we talking about this topic?
Well, okay, so it started because I started thinking about this because lately I've been getting a lot of like political flyers and emails and whatever, and they're all just like super generalized. They don't know who I am. It's not a thing. I also have been weirdly getting like form emails from vendors and stuff like, hi, Diana, like name in parentheses. Be sure to fill this out, right? There's from people that I know, right? Like I know these vendors and they're still sending this like, hello, customer, can you do this thing that I need you to do? And so I started thinking about that. And then I got this lovely email or lovely letter in the mail, actual physical mail that was so personalized. And the person really took time and energy and thought to like write me a personalized letter. And it felt really good. And it was very kind. And I loved getting it. And I just sort of thought in this day of AI and this day of, template everything and form letter everything, how wonderful it felt to get something very personalized. And I think I used to take more time to do those types of things. I used to, every time we got the Springfield Business Journal, I would go through it and find the people who were mentioned in the Business Journal for whatever reason. And I would take them and I would shoot them a note. I would write them a handwritten thank you and just sort of say like, thanks for what you're doing in the community. And I can't wait to meet you, or I'm so proud of you, whatever it was. And I think people enjoyed that. I think we like feeling like someone took intentional time to personalize something for us. And so I kind of wanted to share that today and just sort of say like, how do we do better at this? Why is it important? And what do we need to do to take the intentional time to do that?
Yeah, and I think this is a great topic for if you are an employee and you're just working with other people on your team to show gratitude to each other. I think there's opportunities for that. I think it's also a really great topic for the managers out there, business owners out there who a lot of times think about, how do I automate things, or how do I get really busy, or things like that. And you forget that there's individual people working for you, and it's very nice to be seen. There's nice moments that when you are actually seen for the person that you are, not just for the great job. We talk about it even in feedback, like giving generic feedback to somebody. Hey, you're doing a great job is not very effective feedback. I think you're awesome. You're fantastic. You're grade A. Those are all generic feedbacks.
Oh,
Giving very
thank you.
Stephanie. Stephanie was starved for it. She just wanted to hear something. Just wanted to hear something really positive.
I'm
Stephanie,
always going to grab it. Yeah,
you'll grab it anyway.
I'll
It works
grab
on
it.
some people still, but not everybody. So yeah, so let's start off by talking about like what does individualized feedback look like? Like what are we talking about when we say individualized feedback? What makes it individualized? What's the feedback? What does that look like?
I think it's really what you were just talking about in a sense, Don, of like it's specific to me as a human being. And it specifically like notices something I did or a quality that I embody really well, or maybe how I have treated a coworker or a client or customer or something like that. Like it's specific to me and feels like, no, you probably wouldn't say this exact thing to somebody else on the team today. Not to say that you wouldn't ever say it about anyone else ever, but that, yeah, like when you said that to me today, it was specific to me. And I think it goes to the positive and the critical feedback, right? And we may talk about this in the podcast is like in personalization of critical feedback. But the positive feedback, I think, is what we hear a lot of leaders struggle with, especially. And the pushback that we hear really often is just like, well, I hate doing that because it never feels genuine. I hate doing like the pat on the back, like good job, bud, or what you were saying, Don, of like people feel when it's not genuine. And so it needs to be specific and it needs to be intentionally given. Like it felt like you actually took time to come find me or take time away to say that, because you could say something really meaningful, but if like it's in passing as you're going down the hallway past me, that also doesn't feel great. Or as you're running out the door to do something else, like give me time to respond to that as well, because everyone likes receiving that feedback. And so I like most people want to be able to acknowledge when you've said something really meaningful, like, oh my gosh, like, thank you. That really meant a lot to me. But if you're just like saying it as you're breezing by, you don't give me the opportunity to actually like thank you for that as well.
Yeah, so I like how you pointed out like it's the specific feedback. It's not just that you're doing a great job. It's I noticed that you did this, this, and this. And we also tell people that it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be big. It's just I saw you do that. Hey, thanks for picking up that piece of trash on the floor, or thanks for handling that customer situation really well, or thanks for jumping in on that project that you jumped in. That's really, really specific. Um, the idea of one of the things that I know I stress out about on this topic a little bit, and I'll be honest, like when Diana said like the individualization, personalization thing, I felt a little bit of stress rise up in my blood, because some people are very, very good at individualization. Like individualization is one of the strengths finder tests, strengths finder strengths. Stephanie, is yours pretty high on individualization?
It's in my top 5.
It's in the top 5. Ever heard of it? It's top 5. One of the top strengths. Which doesn't surprise me at all, knowing you, because when you know people, when you introduce people, what you can see is not just who they are or what their job is, but you pick up what I would consider to be strange details about that person, like really helpful details, but like you just pick up a lot of information about people fairly quickly. Would you agree with that? Am I describing that strength pretty well? I'm kind of describing it from the outside. What's it look like from the
Yeah.
inside?
It probably is an outside looking in because for me, I do it very naturally. So like I remember people and I remember things about them. And that was probably the point for me that I realized like, oh, maybe this is a unique strength because other people don't. And now I will say I still kind of suck at names sometimes, but like this is actually a great example. A couple weeks ago, we work in downtown Springfield. I'm leaving our office. Someone is walking out of the parking lot where we park our cars, and I recognize her face. And it's the mom of a girl that I went to high school with. And then all of a sudden, I'm remembering things about their family, what was going on in their lives, sports that they played, where they lived, different stuff. And I mean, I think some of that it maybe is just like part of my brain wiring, but I think the strength of that is like I remember unique details about people. So yeah, if you tell me what your favorite food is, or something that you like, or a sport you played growing up, or what instrument you played in middle school band, I will remember that. And I have even like kind of accidentally stepped in it before with some of those things, because this is where I've realized not everyone does this. And I'll have met someone one time and then we're in a social setting and I meet them again. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, you love Stromboli or whenever you used to play the clarinet. And they look at me like, that's freaky. Like, why do you know that about me? We don't have that deep of a relationship. But it's just because, like, if you tell me something about you, I will remember it. And then I use that information to like relate to you, because relator is high for me as well in the strengths. It's no longer in my top 5, but it's high for me as well. So I'm using that information in some ways to like customize like how I approach you, or if we're making decisions, I'd be like, well, I know this person kind of likes this or doesn't like that or feels this way, or they told me a story one time about this and it was awkward for them or hard for them. And I remember those things about people.
You exceptionally do remember. It is freaky. I have been on trips with you where we're close, but every once in a while you'll say something and I'm like, dang, how does she know that about me? Like, I don't know, one time you were like, you don't really like bacon. And I was like, yeah, I don't. But
I
why do you
don't.
know that? Like, why do you remember this? And it also makes it really hard to buy gifts for you, for the record.
It
Very
is. And I will
intimidating.
even say this is like one thing in my life that this is an aside, and I'm going to try to make it really fast. But like for me, yeah, buying gifts for me is hard. Or like my birthday is like a sacred day because I feel like I remember everyone's birthday. I know what they like. I give gifts intentionally based on what I know you'll like and how you do it. And it's not that I'm like a gifts person, right? Like that's probably like, if you know, you look at the concept of like love languages, it's probably middle of the road for me of actually receiving a gift. But if it's something that, wow, like I can tell you thought about me and what I would really like, it makes it meaningful. And so because I think that way, I give that way, I love that way in my relationships and friendships. And so like my birthday, if someone who I feel close to forgets my birthday, which has happened, I think it's happened in everyone's life,
Yeah.
it's really hard for me. Like, or if they give me a gift or something and they like seem really excited to give it to me, and then I get it and it's like so not me, it makes me like question, like, do they even know me? Like, do they listen when I talk? But then this
So
is where again, like I've learned to have grace for that because I've realized I have unique strength
you do.
in
So
that
you
area
have
that
this
not everyone does.
very, very unique strength in individualization and customization. But what happens if you're kind of like Don and I and you're not
We're
amazing at that?
we're
What how do
we're
we
dead
do that?
inside. We're dead inside. What do we do? What do we do?
How
Because
how do
you
I customize?
well, when you kind of talked about this, and look, we talked about it like in terms of gift giving and birthdays and stuff too. But to broaden the scope of this a little bit, it can just be just some daily conversations you have with a coworker or an employee that you have or whatever. It's just remembering those little details. Like we acknowledge how you feel when you get those little details. Like it makes a big difference. Like if you remember, hey, how's Johnny doing in softball, or those little things. When a boss says that, I've had so many employees come to me and say, my boss remembers, that my kids are in Little League or whatever, that they had a championship game last week, or they wanted to know, those little details make a big difference in terms of relationships. But it does stress out. Like hearing you say that, Stephanie, even your birthday's in August.
Yes, it's only a couple days from yours, so don't forget it.
But it did make me stressed. I was like, what did I don't remember exactly what I did. Did I say the right things? Did I do anything nice? Did I do like, I don't remember fully like what happened. And it does bring stress. So I'm kind of acknowledging like a lot of the people on this listening right now, wherever you're listening, some of you might be going, well, yeah, I love to have the individualization stuff. And of course I have that strength and you're just use that naturally. But I think most people don't have that strength and it
Yeah.
stresses you out. So then in fact, not only do I not have the strength, I'll speak for myself. And Diane, I don't know if you're in this too, but I so don't have that strength. That's so far down in my strength that I actually will anti-individualize so that I don't step in it and forget something. Like if I go, because I have been in a situation where, how are your kids? I'm like, I don't have kids. I've done that before. Or I've absolutely done those kinds. So then I'm like, just then my greetings become super generic, like, hey, you, it's been a while since I've seen you at the thing that we were at.
I think this is funny because I think I'm in between the two of you, right? So we have all the extremes in the middle. I definitely value the personalization, and I can remember certain things, and I can very quickly discern and recognize things in people. And so I use that of like, oh, you're a really positive human. I can use that. Or you're a really fun individual. You're really outgoing. I can use that. So I can discern it really quickly and use it again. But yeah, it still causes stress for me. And so I'm going to be super honest, for me to do it, I have to like build it in as part of my like work system. And then it doesn't feel as genuine, but it really is. Like I just have to like intentionally build the time in to like go and do that for people.
So what's
I
that
don't
look
think
like,
about.
Diana? Like because that's where I think I was going with that idea. Because I do something
Um,
similar to that occasionally, where I have to it's almost like remind yourself to be nice, or remind yourself. I mean, it feels like that a little bit, and
it
it feels
does.
maybe a little disingenuous, but it's also so impactful. And also, like somebody told me recently, they said, the work that you're putting in behind the scenes when that's not a natural strength is also very flattering. So even if somebody knows, like, well, I had to write that down, or I had to keep a list, or I had to put a whatever. So tell me a little bit. I'm curious about what's your system for heaping praise upon me.
Well, there's a few. I have some things in place to keep our team feeling appreciated, right? Their work anniversaries and their birthdays. I have like a master list, and I update that every year, and like we have a software that I use to like send thanks to them and send appreciation to them. So I do that. Um but it really is like every year I have a block on my calendar that's like update the anniversaries and birthdays, and like go schedule those things, right? And then I also have a quarterly thing where I'm like, okay, it is time for you to go and appreciate your team. And so I do have that. But then there are also times where I can feel the love from my team, and then it makes me want to send it back. So I use the trigger of like, oh my gosh, my team has done amazing things for me. I need to go and like appreciate them. Um, and I think I've done that recently. Like I felt a lot of love from you guys recently. And so I was like, okay, I need to go and individually tell each of them that I appreciate them so much. So there's certain triggers that I have. I do have calendar invites, I have emotional triggers, and then I have the like
Pay it forward.
quarterly things. What?
And the pay it forward, when you see it, like, I got it, so I'm going to pay it forward. I'm going to give it to somebody else.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I did a thing for a little while, and it was from a speaker I heard at a conference, where I was meditating first thing in the morning, like after I'd take a shower and stuff, and I would sit and I would just meditate for 10 minutes. And I use the Calm app, if you don't know about that. And it was just real easy meditation thing. You just sit there, and then at the end of that meditation, when your mind's kind of clearer, what I would do is I'm going to send somebody something every day that I appreciate, and just let them know I appreciate them. I would just send it as an email. Like they did say, like you could go, like they also laid it out. Like if Stephanie was doing it, Stephanie could take it to another level of saying, like, I say, Don really likes bourbon cream, so I sent you a bourbon cream recipe that included bourbon cream in it, or something. Because I also know you're a foodie, and I did this for the like Stephanie would do stuff like that. But for me, it was just like, I'm just gonna remind me to have some gratitude, to put it out there. But also in the meditation act, it made me also forced me to think, what's the gratitude about? So then you can get specific, and it might not be an individualization strength, but it's more of, if I'm sending something to Diana, it's like, how has Diana impacted my life? Why am I grateful for Diana? Why did Diana's name even come up in my thought right now? And then you can be very specific about that. There's a saying that we use a lot when we talk about management training, and it's the idea that great managers play chess, not checkers. Let's start off by, what does that mean? Why do we use that analogy? Because not everybody gets that right off the bat, of why are we talking about chess, not checkers? What's the difference between chess and checkers, and why do we talk about that?
Well, I'm reading a book where the characters play chess right now. So I'm like, oh, my brain is in chess. But we've all played checkers, right? And when we will do this, usually in a training, we'll be like, okay, show of hands, who's played checkers before and knows the rules? Like you feel confident you know the rules of checkers. And everybody raises their hand. We've all been to a Cracker Barrel or went through the third grade, right? We all know how to play checkers. But then when you say, okay, now who knows how to play chess, has played a full chess game, you feel really confident in the rules. Then it's like two, maybe three people raise their hands. And it's because chess is a more complex game. In checkers, every piece has the exact same rules. They can all move the same way. So you really only have to memorize, let's say maybe generously a handful of rules to be able to play checkers really well and understand the game. Whereas chess, every single piece has different power, so to say. It can move different ways in different directions. It can overtake other pieces in different ways. The chess board itself has more spaces and is more complex. There's plays you can learn for chess. There's different ways of opening the game that get you different results. Whereas like checkers, there's just not that many variables. The window is small, whereas chess, it's larger. And so we say that the same for people. Every single human being is unique, and they are coming to your team with different personalities and preferences of how they like to work, what they like, but also different strengths and experiences. So things they're better at maybe than other people, areas where they're not as strong or have weaknesses, and past work experience that has given them skills, and even like preferences for how they like to be managed and things like that. So as managers, we have to learn to identify those things so we know how to like play everybody into their best role, or know when we are maybe playing someone outside of their comfort zone, and how do we manage around that if that's what the business requires right now.
I really like that analogy. And Philip brought something I thought that was really interesting to the table because I'm learning. I've known how to play chess for a long time, but I've got the chess app now, and I'm playing it and trying to get up to well enough that I can play my son, who's like an 1800 scored chess player now. He's very, very, very good. And I'm just trying to get it where I don't get fools mated by him every time I play him and learning stuff. And I recently checkmated the computer that I was playing using my pawn. And so that felt amazing. Like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like I knew how to use the other pieces for that. But Philip brought up an analogy that I think is really interesting. New chess players, and I've absolutely done this, tend to bring the queen out at the very beginning because if you know chess, the queen can do everything. And they tend to bring the queen out early in the game because they get really excited because that's the piece they can do everything. So I want to bring them out because they're really, really powerful and they do stuff. And experienced chess players destroy the player that brings the queen out early because you can trap them. They're out there by themselves. They're not defended very well, and they can take the queen. And then once you take the queen, then you're ahead on your numbers, and you're probably going to win. And that's what experienced chess players love it when new chess players bring out their queen early. Managers do the same thing. Is whenever you think about from a manager standpoint, who's your queen? It's probably you because you can do just about everything. So you think when you're managing a team, you bring yourself out first, and then you go to do all the things, but then you wonder why your pieces aren't out there with you. And then you get destroyed really easily. Where a good manager understands, okay, what can my different pieces do? What are their strengths? And they bring them out together so they can work together, so they can defend each other. So then the question is, how can you learn what your different pieces can do? We do this as a workshop. We do delegation workshops at several conferences, and delegation is another topic we've covered in the podcast, and it's a big problem for it's the barrier between a supervisor and an executive. Between that, you have to learn to delegate. And if you don't learn how to delegate and you somehow still get to an executive role, you're probably not doing a very good job as an executive, just to be frank. If you're an executive and you don't delegate very well, you're struggling. You're holding your company back. Just telling you, just flat out. But in that delegation workshop, we tell people like you have to get to know your team. And what's interesting is every time we've done this, and I've started talking about it even more, the managers in the room will say, "Well, of course I know my team. I know Diana, I know Stephanie, I know Philip, I know my team, I know Bethany, I know everybody on my team. I know what they do." And then we start to challenge them by what do you need to know what they can do? Like let's lay it out. And we actually put a chart and we talk about like almost a team inventory. And we say, do you know what their natural strengths are? Do you know what their natural communication styles are? Do you know how they like to be recognized? Do you know what some of their past experiences outside of this job have given them? Like what are some of the things that they can do really, really well? And when we start to list those things out, you see the manager start to change their expression going, maybe I don't know my team as well as I thought I could. And maybe I'm missing stuff. Maybe I don't know all the things that the pieces can do on my board. So my question is, how can you get to know your pieces on your board? And then if you're not an individualization strength like Stephanie, how can you track that and get to know what the piece, how to use those pieces?
Well, and I'm just going to say for the record, even those of us who have this as a high strength still have to systematize it. And so like what I'm going to share is I think like good for whether yeah, you kind of do this naturally or whether you don't have that as a strength. Early at one point in my career earlier, I did donor development. And I was being mentored by somebody who did a lot of sales and was a very successful salesperson. So shout out to Ron. And he gave me a book, which I'm not even going to say the title because this book was published like in the mid 80s. And so it's very like out of touch now in terms about how it talks about the workplace and different things. But what this like person was saying in the book, and it was a sales approach, it was like you should be creating, he called it a country club experience for every person you're trying to sell to or every donor. So he literally created his own database about people. And again, because this book was in the 80s, there's like a template in the back for making your own file folder. Um, but he literally
Miss
lists,
paper, guys.
I
Ugh.
know. But in there, he literally had a list of like 50 questions or 50 data points that you should know or try to get to know about everyone you're trying to sell to. And it was everything from like, yes, like their kids' names or things like that you were saying, but then even like, what's their favorite drink? What's their favorite restaurant? What do they not like? Are they a member of any society or any of these things? And I mean, it gets like crazy specific. And I remember like doing donor development and because I really felt like, oh, like some of our best donors, I know these things. And I went to start filling it out and I was like, gosh, I don't know some of this. So all this to say is like, I think you find out by asking and just having conversations and like, don't be weird and like go take someone of like, I've created this assessment in order to get to know you better. Your individualization people will really hate that. And it makes them feel not seen. It's like, wow, you couldn't answer any of these questions on your own about me or like educated guesses here. But to like think about that of like, do you know their strengths? Do you know their preferences? Do you really even know like some of their work history and maybe like projects they've worked on in the past and former jobs? And so I think it's just having conversations with them and getting to know it. So that way you can create this individualized experience. Because what the man in the book did, which this is just to share the story, and this is not so we're recommending to do with your team, but what he would do is when he found out all of that information and he wanted to meet with someone for a sales experience, he would book a table at their favorite restaurant and have their favorite drink sitting on the table, like when they walked in the restaurant. So he was like, it's that country club experience. And so it's to think about like, how could you translate that for your team to say like, hey, like we have this task or this thing we need to accomplish. Like, how do I tap the people on my team that it would feel like amazing for them to be able to do this? Or sometimes it's knowing we're not able to maybe totally customize in that way. And so it's like, okay, yeah, if I'm working with this person on my team and I know this is outside of their area of strength, how could I at least acknowledge that and check in with them regularly, ask them what support that they need to be able to do this type of work because I'm acknowledging that this is pushing them outside of their comfort zone or it's not their favorite part of their job, but that they really appreciate them doing it. Like sometimes it's even that, right? We can't always customize to like perfection in those ways because there's certain things that we can and can't control. But I would just say like even for those of us who are natural at it, we still have to like systematize it and write it down. It's easy if you're managing 2 or 3, 5 people to keep this information in your head. But even for me, like if I had 50 people, 100 people. Like I said, when I was doing this with donors and I had more than 1,000 people I was trying to maintain donor relationships with, I had a database where I kept this information, or I knew someone else who kept a note on their phone of just like some of the basics. So when they ran into somebody in public and they saw them across the parking lot, they're like, okay, what's her name? And what's her kids' names again? So that way when I go up, I like don't go, hey buddy, how are you? Because you were saying that earlier, Donna. It made me think one thing I really hate as a high individualization person is when I run into someone who I've met several times before and they tell me it's nice to meet you. And I'm like, we've met. We've met at more than once, right? Like I'm willing to give the pass at least one time, but we've met multiple times and you tell me it's nice to meet you. So I will say that's one trick. I have a friend here in Springfield who she'll say, I always say it's great to see you. And so whether or not I've met them before, I don't actually have to remember that. It's great to see you. Thanks for being here today. Some of those things.
I like the idea a lot of keeping an inventory or a database or something. And it doesn't have to be that extravagant, like you said. If you're a manager of people, keep a team database together, create a table for it. We've got it. We use Microsoft Teams, and in our Teams channel, there's a team channel inside of there, and the team channel has individual people in it, and it's got a little profile for each person in there that when we onboard folks, we ask them a bunch of questions and we put some of the information in that. And so you can go back and look at that. And I've been surprised every once in a while I'll go back and look at that. Like our team's been together for quite a while. Like all of us have worked together for at least a year or longer, and some of us a lot longer. But going back to that, occasionally I'll look at it and go like, oh, I forgot about that. I forgot about that person, and then you can kind of go back and understand it. I think also keeping the inventory of the different things, you can use onboarding as a really good excuse. Like it's a really good moment where it makes people feel good. That is a moment where it feels good to answer questions, right? It doesn't feel good after they've been with you for 20 years or something like that to go, Diana, what do you like movies? Do you like Star Wars, Diana? I don't know if you like Star Wars or not. I'm not sure. She loves Star Wars.
I love Star Wars. And if you really didn't know, I quit.
Yeah, I quit because she just sent me a Yoda bookend and an R2D2 pillow for my new house, which is
Right.
fantastic.
That's right.
Also,
Because
uh,
you love Star Wars too.
I love Star Wars too. And so we knew we had that in common, which makes it easier to be able to remember that, but it's something that we can always go back to. Uh, but yeah, having that stuff down someplace and recording that and asking that up front, or doing team activities, here's a little trick, in terms of like faking it, is if you have somebody new on the team, you can bring the team together and then ask a whole bunch of questions, and you get an opportunity to kind of reset, and you can ask questions that maybe you didn't know before to the whole team and write stuff down. And I'll be honest, maybe I'm showing too many cards here because you guys are all on my team before, but I've done this before, like when somebody new starts and we're going around the room and I felt, Diana, who I've worked with for over a decade, might say something and I'm like, huh, oh, that's new information. Like, go ahead and capture that. Go ahead and write that down and put it down someplace, because I think that individualized attention really goes a long way.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
you know,
just some of what we talk about, like just becoming curious about your people. And so, yeah, like be a little bit of a detective. And like we all have phones where we can take a note at any moment in time. So, like, yeah, if you hear somebody on your team say something you didn't know about them before, just like jot it down and then add it back to your private file later. And I'll just say this because I think there's got to be at least one person listening to this who's like, well, isn't that weird? And wouldn't it be weird for people to find out that I've got a little like folder or file or a note about them? And you're not wrong, but I would say as someone who really values that, it actually makes me feel cared about because it shows me that even if this is not a natural strength for you, you are intentionally working to remember that because you know that it's important to me. So
yeah,
I don't care that if you guys have a folder about me now, it better be all nice things or I'm mad about it. But like that doesn't bother me at all. I don't think it's weird. I know that I do it really naturally and other people don't.
Yeah, I mean, for a while I was worried when I put things on my calendar, like send thank you notes, right? Like everyone can see my calendar, everyone knows what that is. And then a week later they get a thank you note. And I was like, yeah, that seems kind of crummy. But at the time I asked someone, I was like, hey, is that weird? And they said exactly what you just said. Like, no, actually, it's kind of cool that you blocked time on your busy schedule in your busy life to sit down and do this for me. And I'm honored I made the list, right? Like, no, thank you for doing that. So I kind of think of it that way. One time I was looking at my husband's calendar and it said send Diana flowers. And at first I was like, oh, he better be me, Diana. That better be like the first, it better be me. And then I was like, that's actually really sweet that he put that on there just to like not drop it, because life gets crazy. And so I kind of was like, okay, I'm just going to do that from now on. I'm just going to like put it on my calendar. I'm just going to systematize it because I know how important it is, but I also know how easy it is to drop it.
Yeah. It's the same way in which like you would put like change your air filters on your calendar. Like this is actually, here's a funny story really quick. Like, cause everybody has like, we all have those little things you've calendarized because like nobody has time to think about when was the last time you changed your air filter in your house or your car or when you did this. Like, so we all put those things on our calendar. And one time, my husband had a job where he got a new computer. And so they wiped his computer and gave his old one to somebody else on the team, but it didn't wipe it completely. And she told me, because I knew her as well. And so she texted me one day and she's like, don't forget to clean your vacuum filter today. And just like, because she was still getting some of those little funny notifications, which first off was just like hysterical. And I was like, also, you need to go talk to IT and maybe this person should not be in IT because if they couldn't wipe the calendar from this, I'm a little concerned. But it's like that. Like we all need reminders. Like we all have a lot that's happening in our lives. The world happens really fast. Like, so in the same way you'd remind yourself to do some of those important things or schedule a dentist appointment or go to the doctor or do different things, like you can do that and with your team too, just to remember and like make that really intentional.
Yeah, I like that. So systems, tools, if you're not that person, if you are that person, a little bit of grace for people who aren't. So if you do see somebody that puts a reminder out, I was thought of a manufacturing facility that we work with, and the president used to do like walkarounds, and the people talked about how excited they were about how he would do these walkarounds and just talk to people. And then somebody saw it on his calendar. And he realized that he had put it on his calendar for doing that. And first they were a little bit like, "Oh, see, he was faking it and all that kind of stuff." And then somebody else pointed out exactly what you guys brought up before, saying, "No, actually, he thought it was important, so he puts it on his calendar to make sure that he does it." So he's blocking off time to make sure he spends time with us. And if you're a manager and you're thinking, "Well, I don't have time to do all that stuff," I'm going to tell you then what you're telling me, the consultant translation to me is you don't have time to manage your team. That's what I'm hearing you say. It's not a side thing that you're doing connecting with your people on a personal level. It's an investment that you're making in the relationships of the people that you work with, and you need to dig your well before you need it. That personalization is an opportunity for you to get to know your people and create those relationships so that when something doesn't go well and you need to give the specific negative feedback, then you've already invested the positive feedback in, so that negative feedback is taken really, really well. Otherwise, if the only time they hear from you, and by the way, this very, very common problem in management is the only time your employees hear from you is when something's wrong. The only time somebody hears from you is, okay, something must be wrong. And then and you can tell, by the way, if you're in that mode, just go talk to somebody, just say, hey, to somebody who you work with and watch their response. Just really watch their body language. Yeah. And if they look at you like, oh, what's wrong? What's wrong? Then maybe you're not spending enough time building those relationships. I've had some folks come to me, and I'm going to talk generations a little bit. It's usually a boomer come to me and say like, why do I have to have relationships with the people I work with? And it's because you want to work with them well. That's why you want to work with them. It doesn't mean that you have to go over their house for Christmas morning or something like that, or do anything really weird or spend thousands of dollars with them on gifts or things like that. In fact, you probably shouldn't do all of that stuff. But the idea of knowing your team and knowing them individually as humans and people and connecting with them at that level starts to build trust. And that trust turns in yields whenever you start to work together on projects. It builds trust whenever things don't go right and you have to give negative feedback. It helps your team, it helps your performance, it actually helps your bottom line. So that's when you're doing your job as a manager, is by learning the different people individually. So hopefully this was helpful for everybody in terms of the individualization strengths. It's funny listening to it. It stressed me out a little bit, Stephanie, like hearing when somebody's really good at that strengths, because it triggers a little bit of like I don't want to say, hey, nice to meet you, when I've already met somebody. I actually did that earlier today. It's so funny. I said, hey, nice to meet you. And I saw their reaction immediately. And I went like, we've actually met, haven't we? Like, I can't think. And they're like, yeah. And I can't think of where we've met. but we have absolutely met. And I'm like, okay, good. So we're on the same page here.
You did fine. You fixed it. You acknowledged it.
I
I think
handled it.
when it's painful for me is like when it feels like we've had enough conversation that you should know something about me and it feels like you don't know anything. So maybe that's the relief of pressure is like I don't hold people to my like same level necessarily. I think maybe as a younger person I did, but now it's like as I've grown and aged, you realize, oh yeah, like my brain does work differently than other people's. This is a unique strength for me. But I think it's like, yeah, if you mess it up, just acknowledge that you messed it up and that's okay. Because again, it shows me you're trying. Like, and honestly, this is where like a little effort goes a really long way in some of this. And I think you get like, I think leaders would just be so surprised, honestly, how little effort goes a really long way just to showing your team that you've thought about them, that you care about them. You've thought about like what their likes and dislikes are, and you've done something to accommodate or acknowledge that or give them positive feedback on it.
And I can hear somebody in a car somewhere driving to work, listening to the podcast just said, but what if I don't care? I know somebody just said that. Like, I know I could hear it. I could hear it in my headphones. Like what if I really don't care about them? Then what I would say is that you should do this even more because it will help you to care. And managers who really don't care about their people, and I get it because you see that like, oh God, we've got to keep this professional relationship. I don't want to care about the people. I don't want to get into their lives. You're missing an opportunity. You're missing an opportunity for yourself and for others. We don't help each other. We don't lean into each other as humans if we don't see each other as humans. And that's why we talk about being people centric. It's not being not professional. It's actually being a better professional. So if you don't care about your team, learn about them, find out about them, start using that. And then you'll find out that you'll start to build some relationships. And then you'll find that you do care about your team, which will yield more dividends than it yields negativity. So that's good. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this episode. Reach out as always if you've got topic ideas for us. We'd love to hear from you. If you see us out and about at events, like we'd love to hear from you. We've been traveling a lot. All of us have been all over the country, speaking at different conferences. We do that. We're headlining some national conferences next year. Like we're really getting to do some really cool things. And we love it when people come to us during the breaks or during other sessions and saying, hey, we love your podcast. We love listening to this. And if you're the first time listener to the podcast, like check out some of the other episodes. We've been doing this for a long time. Go back and you'll find something valuable somewhere. But tell us what you think. Give us the feedback. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the People Centered Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.